we've got Philip VanDusen, who is a branding expert, the CCO of Verhaal Brand Design. Philip has built an incredible YouTube channel with over 200,000 subscribers with all things branding. This guy is amazing, and I myself am a big fan of his work. Hello, hello, hello. Hi, Philip. How are you?
Hey, Ash. Thanks for having me on the show.
I'm very, very excited. Not that you can't tell or anything. I'm just keeping very quiet about that.
I'm excited too.
Oh, really? Is this the best one you've been on, isn't it? I can tell that by the...
So far, yeah, you have the best intro, that's for sure.
Everybody says that. I did that when I was bored.
It's sweet. Good job, man. I'm like, oh, yeah, I need one of those.
That's what Bob said. When Bob came on, the first thing he said, he went, oh, that's really cool. I was like, yeah, I just did that when I was bored one day. But there's been many, many failed attempts before that. I'm going to say that right now.
Well, that's actually, we can get right into it. That's one of the secrets of the personal branding of failed attempts. We can talk about that.
You're so true, actually. You say that is, I just come off a podcast before recording this, and the guy said, we were talking about the advice you give. And I said, well, everything I give you is because I've done all of the things wrong the first time, which is quite interesting. So I want to dive in for the first question I asked you, Philip, just to and the first question really is what I say to people is, what is your superhero origin story? Now, the reason I say it is just give us a background of you and how you ended up where you are now with this, very much a thought leader established in this space. Tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. The Cliff Notes version is that, I started off as a fine artist. I went to school for painting, and I got my master's degree in painting, actually, with the intention of teaching. And then looked for teaching work for about 5 years. It was very difficult to find. And I ended up starting my own, in frustration, I moved to New York and started my own t-shirt company. And so I started to put some of my artwork on t-shirts and sell it around Manhattan. And after about a year of doing that and finding out how difficult it was to do sales, I found a position at another, like a $5 million t-shirt company down in Dumbo, Brooklyn, and started to work for them as a designer, and very quickly kind of became a art director. And I was managing other people. And suddenly there was like this light bulb moment that went off where I realized managing creative people was a lot like teaching, because you did exactly the same thing. You were inspiring people, you were informing them, you were helping them grow. And that's when I realized that I wanted to be a creative leader. And I loved also the apparel industry, because you could put what I thought was more like true artwork on something that you could sell. So it was not, commercial design. It wasn't advertising. It wasn't, print. It was something that was illustrational, and it was on something that you wore like a badge and you saw it on the street. And so it was like this perfect marriage. And I stayed in the fashion industry for about 15 years and progressed up through companies and the ranks, and became eventually the VP of design, apparel design at Old Navy. And Old Navy's t-shirt business was probably at this point the largest t-shirt business in the year. I don't know what happened.
You're still here. Don't worry, I've got you.
Okay. Old Navy's t-shirt business was a $700 million a year business, which is mind-blowing. Wow. And we actually designed the most popular t-shirt ever in history. We designed the year 2000 Old Navy flag tee, which I think sold 3.4 million shirts, something like that. And and I still see those flag tees walking around on people, which is pretty amazing. And so I was at Old Navy for about 11 years. I then made a jump over to the agency side and worked with a couple different branding agencies, doing brand identity and consumer packaged goods and brand strategy. And then made a jump back over to the client side and became a VP of design at PepsiCo, overseeing their global snacks business, which was some of the biggest food brands in the world. Actually, the biggest food brand in the world, which is Lay's potato chips. No one knows that, but Lay's potato chips is the biggest food brand in the world. They're in over 50 countries.
Oh, wow.
And have like, it's like an $8 billion a year business. I mean, it's insane. Fun fact, What is the most popular flavor of Lay's potato chips in the world? It could be Walker's, like in the UK,
Because
but
there's
what is
Walkers
the
for us,
most?
but Lay's is
Yeah,
Lay's is everywhere else. I don't know because I would have thought, and I bet it's going to be something really obscure, isn't it? But I would have thought it'd be something like salt and vinegar. But I
you
reckon it
would
will be
think
something.
that, or like
Yeah,
sour cream or barbecue or something like that,
yeah.
right? Prawn.
Actually, they are really good. They
Are
are
they?
really good.
I've had them. They are good, and that's because Asia, right? APAC.
Is that what
So
it is? It's the prawn cocktail one, isn't it?
prawn.
They're very in England they call it prawn cocktail in the
Mm,
Walker's one, but it's the same thing, but they're like very pink. So when you get the
yeah,
flavor dust on them, the flavoring
you
is
got something
very pink.
on your finger. Yeah,
Oh, it does. Yeah, it's like Walker. It's not like Walker. It's like you guys have Cheetos, isn't it? We over here we have what's it?
yeah. You make it orange fingers, right?
Oh, yeah, horrible.
Yeah,
I can't stand that.
yeah. So yeah, I oversaw Cheetos too. So I guess I made a lot of people's fingers different colors.
Oh no.
Um, but so yeah, I did that, and then I basically I had a burnout. I just like met a point in my life where I was just kind of questioning whether I really liked what I was doing anymore, and um, I decided to take some time off. And after about a year of doing some soul searching and working with some coaches and trying some different stuff, I decided to start my own agency. So I started Verhel Brand Design, which is a brand strategy and design consultancy, a virtual model, which is where I saw the agency world moving, which is a scalable model where I work with kind of key partners depending on projects that I bring in and work. And that leads me to my kind of personal brand story where and also back to the beginning where I didn't
Yeah.
like doing sales. Like I didn't like walking into a store and trying to sell my t-shirts to people. So one of the things that I decided to do when I went out on my own and started my own agency was I had heard about this thing called content marketing, where you develop content and share on social media and people beat a path to your door. And I thought, hey, this is a good way of doing advertising without actually having to do, sales to bring people to my agency. So that's what I did. I decided to start developing content. I started with a newsletter. About 6 months later, I started my YouTube channel. And my intention was to basically share everything that I know and without reservation and on brand strategy, design, creative careers, and to kind of document everything that I've learned and everything that I've used over my entire career. And so that's what I did on YouTube. And my personal brand empire has kind of evolved and grown from there to a podcast and to a Facebook group and to paid mastermind groups and stuff. So that's kind of that's the
It's
cliff notes.
it's pretty. It's I do know the story because I can say I've listened to some of your podcasts and listened to you being interviewed in other people's. But it's very interesting how it the thing I find very interesting with all the people I speak to who've got very strong personal brands, it usually comes from a moment, which is what mine was, where I started to go, I can't do this anymore. I have to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you say about the soul searching. It seems to be that everyone from that failure. We said it a bit, I think, right at the beginning. Actually, was it comes from failure of this isn't good, and especially if it's really good, it must be quite hard when you're someone at the peak of what you were doing. Really, the companies you're working for are the things that are those massive rocks in your resume that make you go, wow. And then when you don't want to do it, that must be quite a big decision for you to sort of
Yeah,
really
it
go,
is. And it's very, you go through a period of real self-reflection and redefinition of kind of who you are. Because when you work for agencies or company in any regard, you put a lot of your personal identity into your title, into your salary, into the name attached to who you work for. And when that goes away, there's suddenly kind of this vacuum of who you are, what your worth is. When you're VP of design of one of the biggest soft drink manufacturers in the world and you hand them your business card, I mean, you can get a meeting, right? People take
yeah,
your calls. And suddenly when you don't have that, you suddenly kind of look at yourself and say, who am I? I looked at my website. I had a 2-page black and white website online. I'd never published an article, piece of content. And so I didn't really have any kind of presence for myself outside of what this this umbrella entity that I'd worked for had given me. And that was a real wake-up call. And it was also, I was just talking to a coaching client about this, it was also a real psychological evolution that I had to go into to kind of create a new identity for myself that was independent of working for anybody else. And that's, you know, the journey I've been on for 5 years.
It's quite impressive. It's very impressive. And so the next question I always ask every guest, but it's kind of moving nicely into what we're going to say next, is what has been some of the high points that you've experienced in your personal brand journey? Now, the reason I say this is there must be some of these moments. I've watched some of your content before, and you can tell different parts of your career as to when it's been recorded. So like there's like one of the ones I listened to on YouTube, and it was very, very beginning, and you can hear it's like a bit of a wow, I can't believe this is kind of happening kind of moment in regards to like the traction. What have been some of those moments that you've thought, obviously you've had this incredible career beforehand, but now, and you say there, you build this identity, you've created this individual person who stands alone. What has been some of those moments where you've thought, wow, they've come to me for me?
Yeah, it's a few things have happened. Well, when I was in the fashion industry, one of the things that I did was I traveled the world, a few times a year and shopped for trend. So I learned how to spot and identify and kind of aggregate trend and communicate it. That was necessary in my role as a fashion design leader. And so when I decided I'm going to start doing this for graphic design and for branding. So I started doing trend videos, and I would put together kind of an aggregation of graphic design trend or web design trend or whatever that was, and do a YouTube video about it. And they were always pretty popular. I did them for a couple of years, and they got more views than almost anything I ever did. And then I did a trend video in 2019 that got picked up by Design Taxi. Design Taxi is a real, very, very popular design industry website, and they put it on their front page for like 3 days. And my viewership just blew up. The video went viral. It got more than 1.2 million views in a period of about 3 weeks. And my head exploded, and my email list exploded, and my email inbox exploded. And so it was just this kind of moment where all of the work, all of the 50 or 75 videos I'd done up until that point, brought me to the attention of someone at Design Taxi who saw my trend video and decided to serve it up and promote my work. And that was fantastic. It was a real kind of a bit of a watershed moment in my content development anyway. And that was really, really fun.
That's really cool. That's so interesting that you say that, only because I was speaking to someone I had a guy on here I interviewed yesterday he's on TikTok. So I got a guy from TikTok, and he's a marketing guy in the UK from Manchester. And I think he must be now, he's about 150,000, growing very quickly. And that's what he said. He said it was the first, he said to get to 100,000 took him ages. He said, no, all these videos, and then it's just one video that and TikTok's views are ridiculous, they're crazy. So he hit, I think the video got something like 9 million views, which is, he was like, and the next thing all these doors started to open. But he said, but the other thing he did say was, he said it quickly shut. But as quick as it went open, he said it went within about 3 weeks. It was like, oh, okay, back to the normal videos again. Which is
crazy. And it does, and it's like, it's exciting and exhilarating. And my subscribership, I think I got to 75 before that happened, and then it jumped from like 75 to 150, and then I've gone back to kind of like adding my couple thousand a month, and now I'm up to 200. But it was like, it was this big spurt, but then it goes away and you go back to your normal kind of rate of growth. And it's probably like, it's internet fame, right? It's very fleeting, and you just have to continue to pedal the bike. You got to keep putting in the work. You got to keep posting the stuff and coming up with ideas. I mean, content marketing and content development is a long game. I've been at it for 5 years, and it didn't even, I think, bear any fruit for the first year and a half. You really got to show up. It's a real commitment. I mean, a lot of people think that they put 5 videos up on YouTube and suddenly they're going to have a YouTube channel, quote unquote. But you know, it's and then they get frustrated when they have to do 10 and they still only have, you know, 100 subscribers. That there are so many people who have millions of subscribers now who put out, you know, 100, 200, 300 videos before they ever broke, you know, 1,000 or 10,000 subscribers. And then it starts to build, it picks up because YouTube starts promoting your work, Google starts promoting your work, and then, you know, you gain inertia. But you really have to, you got to put a lot of money in the bank before interest starts to accrue.
I think that's quite interesting. YouTube has been a new thing for me since I've only started doing it now. There's a guy that I know said, and the advice he gave me, he said, don't even focus on anything else before you do your first 100 videos. He said, don't even worry about the metrics, the views. It's really strange, you know. I'll do, and that's the thing I find strange is I can spend hours editing a video and it's brilliant, gets 12 views. I can do a live that's 5-minute live using StreamYard, talking about a piece of software, and it does 300, 400 views, which is not a lot for me, but it's not a lot for like someone else. But like when you've only got like 100 subscribers, it's like, oh, okay, there's no rhyme or reason to it. But what they said, and like, which is interesting, someone in your stance with of like now looking at the other side of it, 200,000. It's 203 when I looked this morning. So there you go. Get your numbers right, Philip. Come on. It's interesting because truthfully, like he was saying, like, until you start ranking for keywords, it's SEO, isn't it? He said until you start ranking for keywords, you have to you just have to keep showing up talking about the same things. And that's one thing he was saying. He looked at my channel and he was like, he's a nice guy, but he was like, looked at my channel and said, no, first of all, stop vlogging. And secondly, he said, stop vlogging. He said, because no one cares and no one's interested unless you give them a reason to be interested. And then the other thing he said, which was quite good, he was like, is unless you're not having personal, but you want to be personal branding. He said, unless there's personal branding in the titles of everything you do, you're diluting your message because people are going to start thinking you're a marketing guy or you're this guy. And funnily enough, since I've done that, it's getting better. Like it's crazy that it works that way. But it's nice to see that someone like you say yourself, that you put in that effort. And actually you said that you did like the first 100 videos and it still takes time. So
absolutely. Yeah. And Google doesn't know. I mean, the more videos you put up with certain keywords, the more you will start to rank for those keywords. But Google rewards consistency, just like YouTube rewards consistency, just like Google does. If you put up a website and you don't update it for 3 years, Google will, you know, put you down at page 5,000 on Google search. But if you add a blog post every week, or you update an image, or you go in and change some copy, Google sees that website as being an active, you know, vibrant website. But if you let it go stale, it'll ignore you. Same thing with YouTube. YouTube doesn't know what your video is about, really. I mean, if you publish once a week, twice a week, you can do a vlog. You can do, you know, you walking down the street with a handheld iPhone. It doesn't matter as long as you attach the correct keywords to it and you're posting something that will, you know, that will affect you in how much YouTube is serving you up in its organic search mechanism. And those things are, Google's and YouTube's are so incredibly tightly linked that you're doing work on one affects the other no matter what.
That's really impressive, actually. That's quite cool. So what made you, this isn't a question, but it's one of my things going in my head, is obviously you started with the podcast, the YouTube, and you've moved over to the podcast. I'm also in your group. Like, at what point did you decide, okay, I've YouTube's doing really well, now is time to branch out, and what decisions were behind those? Because I think the one thing I've found with a lot of people is that, and this is someone, like I say, a mutual friend of ours was telling me about, is that we take on too much. So when I look at, you know, like we go, like, I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, like, what made you decide, okay, my next step is a podcast and a Facebook group?
Yeah, my initial, I actually did a video about this, like, should you do a YouTube channel or a podcast? And at the time, when I looked at what I was doing and what I needed to get across to people, I knew that I needed to periodically have visuals involved in it. I mean, you can do a podcast, but I'm never going to be able to, I would never have done the trend video on or a trend segment on a podcast and have it go viral because there's no visuals involved. And so, I'm a designer, I'm a visual guy, I create visual products. And so having some sort of visual component to the content that I was putting out was really important. And so that's why I started with a YouTube channel. I also knew going into it that Google and YouTube were very closely related, and the SEO from YouTube would affect my SEO on Google. And so that was also important. At the time, podcasting was also going through this phase of like being really hot. Like everybody wanted to have a podcast and everyone was putting up a podcast. My plumber had a podcast. And I was just hearing about it. It was like when Periscope came out. Everyone was like, oh, Periscope, it's going to change the world. And I was just sitting back going, I don't know. I don't know. I did a few Periscope things, and then like 6 months later, it totally tanked. And I was like, man, I'm glad I didn't build my brand on Periscope. And so I knew YouTube wasn't going away. I knew I needed visuals. So I started on YouTube. And then about 3 years later, I was actually, I was doing some research on my email list, and I was doing some deep research into the demographics of the people who were on my email list and saw my newsletter and interacted with me in terms of that platform as opposed to YouTube. And I realized that my YouTube audience was generally, the majority of them were from 20 to 35 years old. The majority of the people on my newsletter who were interacting with my newsletter were anywhere from 35 to 50 years old, 55 years old. So the demographics were like massively split between those two platforms. And I realized that platforms really are very, demographic dependent or indicative. And so I realized one day when I needed to kind of re-listen to one of my videos, but I was going on a dog walk and I needed to play my video so I could hear it. There was an interview, and I had to like hold my phone in my hand with the video going. I couldn't turn the video off and put it in my pocket and hear the audio. So I was just like, this sucks, right? I thought I got to figure out a way to just do audio, because there's a whole demographic who listens to podcasts who span the YouTube and the newsletter audience, who listen on the go, in their car, walking their dog, and they're not benefiting or getting access to my content because they can't walk down the street walking their dog with a YouTube video going. And that was kind of the unlock for me. It was like, I need to start putting stuff on podcasts so people have different options for consuming what I do.
I like that. No, it's interesting because I think, as you said, everyone starts doing it. I think Joe Rogan is the guy, and everybody. And I said, I have this all the time. People go, I'm going to do a podcast. And then I'm like, yeah, but if you're going to talk for 3 hours about nothing, because that's the thing, is that Joe Rogan's one of the very few people who's so successful at what he does, but it's because he's him. So people turn up for him, and that's it. But I think
he's
you're right.
Freaking hilarious. He can talk about nothing, and you're just on your gut hurts after. He's
one
so
of those
funny.
very few people where you want to watch him. But as you said, your plumber, that's what started to happen and lockdown saw a rise of it. It was return of that, where everybody started doing a podcast. Yeah. And I think and it's interesting you say that, and it reinforces. I started on a podcast and then moved to YouTube. Biggest mistake I've ever done. I would admit that. It was like, it's not searchable content. Yeah, I mean, I understand that Google is looking to try and do that, which is be awesome. But it'd be amazing. Thank God.
It would be nice, please, about time.
Yeah, I can't believe it's so late that they've only just maybe considering it. But it's like you say that with YouTube, it was. For me, like you say, like the difference, I started a podcast and my friend did a YouTube channel, and his YouTube channel is killing it now. And that was the difference. And you think, okay, it's long-term searchable. There's no way of searching a podcast unless I have to come. The issue with podcasts right now is there's no way of searching it or finding it, or no simple way. of doing that. You can't just search it. You have to. Most people don't know what it is. They've got to go and look for it. Whereas with YouTube, you probably find that your audience will come across to the podcast from your YouTube channel as well. So there's a better distribution method as opposed to the other way around. They don't really do that, which is a bit annoying.
It's a more unified distribution method now too, because there's so many different platforms to listen to podcasts on. You know, it used to just be iTunes, but now it's Stitcher and Spotify and Anchor, and it's just like incredibly broad. You don't know. It doesn't aggregate all the listenership or even the analytics, the metrics around a podcast. You can't really tell how popular your podcast is. It's very, very difficult.
It is very like Wild West, actually, say that, because it's interesting because each podcast has a different metric that it measures by. You know, someone like Apple, like a key, you know, literally like like marketing, business, that's it. And then you go on Spotify and there's subgenres within that, and you're thinking, okay, well, what's going on?
Well, and like even the platform that I host my podcast on, Transistor FM, it will aggregate the information from across a number of platforms, but a lot of times it doesn't register listens. It only registers downloads. And I don't know about you, but I never download podcasts. I always stream them. So
yes,
it's frustrating because you can't really get true analytics on it or really know what's happening. And that's one of the things about YouTube that's great. The analytics are incredibly deep, and you can really parse like, why was this video successful, even down to like the watch time on people's dropping off of the video, or, you know, being able to A/B test, you know, titles to an extent, or how you're titling your videos. You can tell how that affects popularity.
It's so YouTube is so much more established. It's a bit like looking at LinkedIn to Facebook. Like LinkedIn are rolling out, I don't know if they're doing it over in the US yet, but they're rolling out stories over here. I don't know if that's happening for you guys. They're rolling out stories.
Before you know it, they'll have stories. They'll have their Instagram equivalent. They'll have their, you know,
because that's what they want, don't they? That's what they want.
Platform. They want people to live there. Everyone wants you to have a full life. It's like, here's a great kind of analogy, Ash. It's like, remember in the old days where you used to have a drugstore, right? You would go to CVS or Rite Aid or the pharmacist, right? And they would just have, you know, drugs and make, you know, shampoo and soap and razors and stuff like that. And then they started to become general stores. They started to bring in food, and then they started to bring in houseware, and then they started to bring in snacks. And before you know it, they had a dairy counter or a dairy fridge. And suddenly now all of the large drug stores in the United States have basically become like mini grocery stores. And so everyone is trying to be everything to everybody. And so I think that there's a bit of, you know, survival instinct in there, but I also think that to a certain extent it dilutes the brand, because you don't really know exactly what you should be going there for. Like, that's one of the reasons why brand differentiation and brand focus is so important, is because you want to know why you're going there. Just to circle back to what you said about your YouTube channel, back to you were doing some videos on personal branding, but then you're doing some vlog stuff. And it's like, if you go out of the gate like that, why do people go to Ash Borland, right? They want to know exactly what they're going to get when they go to your channel or go to one of your videos. You don't want it to have to be a crapshoot. And so by niching down and creating that focus, that's what helps you be successful.
And it's interesting, like you said, that at such a large scale, these companies, that's the thing I can't understand, is it's so basic. And I remember one of my coaching clients said, it's so basic that we've forgotten how to do it. That was the thing. I thought that was really, when he said it, you know, it's one of those moments I thought, actually, yeah, like when I worked for a big corporate company, and I'd sit in the meetings, these marketing meetings, and think, are you really serious? Like, how can you not get your, you know, you probably had that yourself. You sit there thinking, it's not that hard. Like, it's really hard. Like, what makes you, and the other thing that I used to find as well with these larger companies is, especially in the UK, I don't know if it's in the US, but they would roll out these campaigns, and they didn't believe in these campaigns. These campaigns were just another gimmick to try and get clients, which was cool, but they didn't believe in them. And what was really funny was every one of them would have been an incredible campaign if they truly embodied it. Really, each campaign was its own business, and they just couldn't get their head around it. They go, I love it when somebody, I don't know where I saw it on a podcast. I think it might have been a Gary Vee podcast, where he said, everyone wants to be authentic and then asks everybody, you know, what should I be? And by that very nature, it's inauthentic. Like it's by saying, if I said to you, Philip, what do you want me to look like? Do you want me to wear a suit today for our call? That very nature is inauthentic. It doesn't make sense, which is quite crazy.
That's true. I mean, when it comes down to it, people ask me about marketing, and like, marketing is trial and error. There are no set rules to marketing. In marketing, you do what works. So you have to try a bunch of stuff, see what's sticky, and then dive in deeper on what works. And so at the beginning, when companies are starting off doing marketing, content marketing or social media marketing, they're like, what should we do? What's the proven method? And it's like, there is no proven method. You can go about this in any number of ways, but essentially you have to try a bunch of stuff and see what your audience responds to. But that doesn't necessitate understanding what the things are that you should try and where you should do them, and how you create analyze those metrics or the feedback that you're going to get, and then how you evolve those decisions. So it's not all that simple, but essentially out of the gate, you got to try a bunch of stuff. Starting a YouTube channel, you got to try a bunch of stuff, right?
See what works.
Sticks. Yeah.
I like that. So one of the questions I wanted to ask after this, which is always, and the reason why I say this, the next question is a bit one that's quite close to my heart from a mental health point of view. And what it is that we all see, so someone like, I could look at you and think, wow, look at like Philip, he's killing it on YouTube. He's doing this, all this stuff's happening. But if obviously feel as candid as you want to share or not share, but what have been some of the struggles you've faced in regards to, and you spoke about it a bit about like the leaving your company, leaving your employed and self-discovery, but what have been some of the struggles? And the reason why I say that is there was a moment I started building my personal brand in a different capacity about 3 years ago. Transferred it. That's been a whole issue in its own right, and you're trying to transfer it from one industry to another. But there was a point where about a year ago, and this is where it came to me, and this was a question that's been very important, is a year ago, everybody was coming, everything in my life felt like it was falling apart. But because I was consistent and putting content out and doing what I was supposed to do, which was my job, everyone was going, you look like everything is amazing. And I remember that was the first reality for me where I thought, because mental health is important to me and my family, it was this thing of like, wow, that is where Instagram and reality, it's real. They don't see it. And so obviously I like to, with my listeners, I like to let them hear these incredible people who we might look up to. We're all human and we all have those worries and imposter syndromes and self-doubt. So what have been some of the struggles that you've kind of had, Philip?
Yeah, I mean, imposter syndrome is a real thing, and I do a lot of coaching, and it seems like the higher up you are, the bigger title you have, the more you have imposter syndrome. I mean, it doesn't care about your title, your salary, where you work. It is one of those things that is affects everybody in one way, shape, or form. And I'm no stranger to that. Like I said, when my title and my business card disappeared, I had to really relook at who I thought I was and what value I had to bring. And not until I started to create and put out what I knew for people to help them learn and grow, did I realize how much I knew, how much I had to offer. And that was one of the things that was a real unlock for me, is when I started putting out content and just saying, okay, I'm just going to capture everything I know and share it out in the world to benefit other people. Did I realize how much value I had and how much I knew and how much I could help people? And so making that transition from feeling very small and feeling very unsupported and insignificant and a bit of an imposter syndrome, building my personal brand and creating that content stream actually is one of those things that built me back up again. So that was definitely a point. That was an inflection point for me. Another big inflection point for me was when my agency was doing well. I had a lot of clients. I had made these content production commitments for myself in terms of putting out a newsletter every 2 weeks, a video every week. And I started to burn out, and then I was also repurposing all my content. So you take your YouTube videos and you put them on LinkedIn, and then you do videograms, and then you put them in your newsletter, and you you promote them on Twitter, and it's just like this constant stream of repurposing. And I was also writing articles for LinkedIn. And I hit a wall where I really realized that I needed help, but I had so much to do and so many balls to keep in the air. And I knew that in order to bring someone on to help me, I was going to have to document all my processes. And I just thought, how in the world am I going to tell someone how to put my newsletter together? There are so many moving pieces and so many files and so many places that I get things. And, you know, every button to click and everything to import into MailChimp to build my newsletter, like, how am I even going to do that? And it kept me kind of in a state of overwhelm for a number of months, almost a year, I think, before I found the right person who actually helped me document what I did to help train her to do what I needed her to do. And that was a big inflection point for me, where I couldn't extricate myself from my work stream enough to start working on my business than in my business. And I think that a lot of entrepreneurs and people who are building small brands or personal brands come up against that at one point or another. I just got off a call. Why I was late? I was late to this interview. Ash, as Ash knows that.
I do know that.
I was about 5 minutes late because I was on a coaching call with somebody, and I was sharing with her that that is one of the things that is a huge inflection point for you and takes some real energy and time to pull yourself back from what you're doing and bring on someone new and train them to help you, because that can exponentially move you forward. But it's like this wall you kind of have to hit up against about 3 or 4 times before you figure out how to break through it. And then suddenly, you know, your time is freed up. More stuff is getting out there into the world to give people value. And you are, you kind of move to a next level. You can start working on your business rather than doing everything in your business. And so that was a big kind of hurdle for me that I got over a couple of years ago. And I teach others now how to kind of address that hurdle too.
I think that's interesting because, as you say, the people lives that comes up a lot whenever I speak to people about this. It comes up a lot. Is that when is that point when, especially if it's a personal brand business, people are coming for you for the YouTube videos, for everything like that. When do you bring someone on? That is a big one, especially when you say that. It's interesting to hear that it was a year. Do you know what I mean? Up to a year of that kind of confusion and like that's. I think that's nice. Not nice. Gosh, I wouldn't hope that at all. But it's in one of those things where it's good. That people know that we all have the same feelings, because that's what I feel like, is that you can look at someone else and God, they've got it all together.
Yeah,
and
I was lucky in the fact that the person I brought on actually had her own agency, so it wasn't just one person. I was basically bringing on one person who had a team, who already had a team, so it was like completely scalable. I haven't had to bring on someone.
They learn the processes, and then boom, it goes.
I basically hired an agency. It was great.
I love it. I've got one question I want to ask you, and then it's probably a quick question, and then before I do the 3 pieces of advice, but and this one is very interesting for me to hear from you. It's you, and obviously I've got Mike coming on. I'm interested to hear from the two of you. This question I ask is, what does personal branding mean to you? And what I mean by that is, what would it, if I was to say to you, describe personal branding, what is it? And the reason why I say that, and it'd be interesting to hear from you from someone from a very much a branding perspective, is it seems very new. It's not a new concept, but it gets bolted on to a lot of things. It gets bolted onto digital marketing. It's bolted onto photography. And my kind of obsession, and that's why I say how I found you, funny enough, with your content, was I was fed up of watching people using it as just a word to hook me in to then try and sell me something or tell me it was. And I think it's its own standalone, in my opinion. It is, because I built a business around it, is that it is a standalone thing. But I'd love to hear what it means to you. What would you define personal branding as?
Insurance.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I love that.
I look at personal branding as insurance. It's an insurance that no one can fire you. No one can let you go. You cannot be sidelined or sunsetted from the business that you're in. You have control over your income, your revenue, You have control over your future destiny. You have control over your intellectual property. You are a independent being. And so I say insurance because it insures you against outside influence, and you are creating your own value and providing value to the world. And as long as you are, transparently and authentically, as you said, creating value and sharing it with true empathy and caring to your audience, then you're successful. And so a lot of people are either transitioning in careers. COVID has brought along a lot of transitions that people were not expecting. People are sunsetted out of careers before they're ready or before they knew what was happening. You get laid off from a job. There's some sort of economic turmoil. Your company gets acquired. There's a reorganization. It doesn't matter what the reason is, but not having a rug pulled out from under you is a terrifying feeling. And I think having some sort of sense of identity and physical, visual, digital identity that you own, you control, is a way to ensure against that, the overwhelm, that fear of having that rug pulled out from under you. So that's how I define it.
I love that. It's not how I've ever thought of it, but it is exactly how I thought of it. But the word insurance has very powerful. When you said that, I thought that's really clever. I've never, because you're right. For the reason why it's funny you said the reason why I started my own one was worked in a corporate environment and didn't feel safe. And it was one of those where, funny enough, I left that environment, started building my own, putting content out on LinkedIn, and then that company re-employed me. And it was so strange a year later how much power I had by having a personal brand.
Yeah.
And they didn't let me go. And when they did let me go, when I left, it was so much more amicable because they were like, well, we can't say anything because if we do, this is Ash, and they re-employed me at like double the. It was ridiculous, just from fear of how what that does. So the insurance, and I wrote a post recently saying I did it to take back control of my own destiny.
Yeah, I was going to say the other word that I would call is control. Yeah,
I love that.
It really is. It's having more control. Or as my friend Roberto likes to say, leverage. He uses the word leverage a lot, and which is true. It gives you a fulcrum to make things happen that you want to have happen.
I love that. And so just to end this with before I give you I always say the shameless plug, which makes people always go, oh, really uncomfortably, I do it on purpose, is what are 3 pieces of advice that you would give to someone who's starting out on their personal brand journey now? So it was right in 2020, what would be the 3 things you would say?
Yeah. Number 1, don't make it more difficult than it has to be. You can listen to a lot of gurus, about personal branding, books, podcasts, YouTube channels, and you can get massively overwhelmed with what that supposedly entails. The number 1 thing I would say to people is start. You have to just start, because if you look at the thing in its entirety and all the moving pieces and what goes into it, it's massively overwhelming, and it can keep you from actually moving forward. And I use an analogy, and you've probably heard it because I say it on every podcast I'm ever on, which is, if you need to learn to play tennis, you can watch a bunch of tennis videos and listen to tennis podcasts and read tennis books and buy the best tennis clothes. But until you actually pick up a racket and start hitting balls over the net, you can't learn tennis. And it's like, you just have to start. Number 2 is you don't want to make it more complicated than it needs to be. You just start with one thing. Don't think that you have to be everywhere. You don't need to be on every social media channel. You don't have to show up every day, every hour of the day. Get a website, a place that you can call home to drive people to, and find one social media platform that you can start adding your value to and start building an audience on. Keep it simple. And then as you get better, as you start to grow, you add a piece at a time. Because if you try to be everywhere, you're nowhere. You'll be too thin in too many places. So go deep on one area. And number 3, I would say consistency is king. You have to You have to sign up to the journey like it's a job. When I started my YouTube channel, I said to myself, I'm going to put out a video every week for a year. This is my commitment to myself. One video a week, every week for a year. I'm going to treat it like a job. If I don't hit my 10 o'clock on Monday deadline, I get fired. And that was the only way that I got to 50 videos, because if I had been looking at my metrics or thinking about it too hard and, questioning my motivation, I would have quit, before I was a quarter of the way through. You have to set a goal for yourself, etch it in stone, and do what you need to do to get there. Consistency is king, because that's the only thing that's going to move you forward. Those are my 3.
I love it. That's brilliant. That's absolutely amazing. There's some 3 very tangible, which is what I love. It's making the intangible tangible. I think that's the hardest thing I find with it. You say talk about gurus and things that people do. It can get very spiritual and very deep right quick. And I think actually that those are 3 very good actionable steps.
Can I add a 4th? I just thought of a 4th.
Go on.
Okay, I get 4. I get 4. I get 4. Here's my 4th. My 4th is you matter. A lot of people have a hard time starting a personal brand because they think, I'm not an expert. I don't know enough. Who can I help? I'm not smart enough. I don't have enough credentials. I haven't been in the industry long enough. What you know, wherever you are in your journey, matters to someone, because even if you just got out of college, there's someone in high school who's going into college who needs to know what you know. If you just got your first job in the industry, there's someone who hasn't gotten their first job in the industry that needs to know what you know. You have things of value that you can help the person who's just 2 or 3 steps behind you get to that next step. So think about it in those terms.
That's very true. That's completely true. Actually, that's the best. That's what I said. Alex Curtis is our mutual friend, and he was the one that said to me. So he was the guy. I didn't want to do this, and I remember him sitting down with me and going, mate, you know enough about this to talk about this every day. Do it. And that's when I'd watched you, Mike, people like that, and gone, well, why would I? When there's these people, and if it wasn't for him, my life wouldn't be what it is now. And I think you're so right with that. Somebody is interested. You don't think they are, and then they just appear, and it is so nice. And then you end up having people like I said, if someone had told me a year ago, with the consistency, someone told me a year ago that I would be able to chat to you and Mike in my podcast, I wouldn't have believed you. And I think we were saying that before you came on like before we went live. Like, that is the power of personal brand for me. This is one of those moments. That's why you get a 4th there, Philip, because you can have that. Is that it is a weird moment for me. Is that like, okay, it's validation for me. Is that okay? That this is, I've watched you. This is really good, and that's what you said does matter. And I think anyone listening to that, who's listened to this, that's quite nice that you've said that, because it completely is happening right now. And that's why I think it's such a good one. So where can people, if people want to work with you, Philip, and people want to, connect with you, I mean, you're literally everywhere. Tell us a little bit about if they want to work with you, if they want to be coached by you, they want to be in the mastermind, whatever it is.
Sure.
Take the floor.
Well, my little piece of digital real estate is philipvandusen.com. And absolutely everything I do is reachable through that portal. So if you go to philipvandusen.com, you'll see links to my YouTube channel. You'll see links to the Brand Design Masters podcast, the Brand Design Masters Guild, which is my mastermind. There are links there in menus to work with me as a consultant for your business, or to hire me as a coach to help you get to the next level in your professional creative career. So it's all reachable through philipvandusen.com. There's one other place that I would mention for people to go, and that is to the Brand Design Masters Facebook group. I just started a Facebook group about 2.5 months ago. It's growing really quickly. People are loving it. You go to facebook.com/groups/brand design masters. You have to fill out a few questions to get in. It's a private group, but it's free. And come join us over there. It's a great place to hang out.
It's brilliant. I will say on that one, I'm using my file setup is the file setup you put in there. You put in a file setup in there when you first launched it. And it was like your file templates as to what you have on your computer. And I still to this day use them every day. They've been amazing. Having a templated file system. And that's what you have in that.
I totally forgot that. That's great. I forgot I put that on there. I'm glad you're using it. That's cool.
It's really, really weird. Like I just when you said it then, I thought, of course, that's where I've was thinking, why do my files look so organized? That is why, because I remember going, screenshot that, brilliant. There's some great stuff that goes in that group. I absolutely love it. I'm one of those lurkers in it because I don't really engage with anything because I'm too busy working.
I'm gonna start tagging you in stuff, Action. Draw you out
Please
into the
do.
open. Put you in the light.
100%. I would love to. I'm going to get more involved in the group. Definitely.
Cool.
That's going to be my new thing. Thank you so much, Philip, for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. Like I say, guys, really do. If you listen to this or watching this, definitely go and check out his content. I mean, it is. Don't check it out over mine because it's better than mine and it's what I use to do it. But just so you know,
Ash has a much better intro trailer than I do.
I need to make an outro as well.
I think I'm actually going to hire Ash to redo my intro trailer.
I think Alex is on the video, actually. We'll watch it now. Let's run it out.